This is the Twisted Mega Tier List. I've done a tier list before, but you guys wanted me to do many more topics than just towns. But I don't want tier list videos to become a regular thing on the channel. So instead of making multiple videos, I included as many tier lists as you guys wanted me to in this video. This includes an updated tier list for every town, a tier list for every vehicle, a tier list for every game pass, and more. So without more to say, let's get into it. Well, first up we have towns, hinting back to an old video that I made quite a while ago. I think it's been over a year now. And the first town on display is Angora. I'm gonna put Angora in A tier because it's the goofiest little town and it recently had a glow up. So Angora is a cool little town to see in the top corner of the map up there. And in the adjacent corner is Andrusia, which I think is also an A tier. Both towns are pretty cool, but Andrusia is probably slightly cooler. So I'm gonna put it higher in A tier than Angora. Now we have Chandler, or Chandel, because it's cut off for some reason. Chandler is definitely an S tier town. It's the town that I live in Keysota. It's one of the nicest little waterfront towns ever, and it's like isolated from the rest of the map, which is perfect. Then we have Wadena, which is a B tier. Wadena keeps getting glow downs basically every single update at this point. It used to be one of the 3 major cities on the entire map, but now Wadena is a lot less cared about. But Wadena is still a pretty cool place, so I'll leave it in B tier and not any lower. Palzoid, honestly, is an F tier. It is the most overrated town in the entire game. I don't think Palzoid is a nice town. I don't think it's in a good spot. I don't think anyone likes it. It's literally just a few houses off to the side of Hazelton, and it gets obliterated in every single chase anyway. So now we have the Hazelton Lakes, or Hazelton Lac, because it's also cut off for some reason. I'll put that in C tier because I think the Hazelton Lakes is once again a very overrated town, and the lakes aren't even very big, and I will give it that it is pretty funny to see the docks go absolutely flying every single chase. You know what, just for that reason it's going up to B tier. Next up we have Gemmel. I honestly really do not like Gemmel at all. It replaced one of the best towns in the entire game, which was Welchenville, and the new alternative is not better in any way. I'm not a huge fan of Gemmel. Next up we have Tenstrike, which is an A tier, definitely. Tenstrike is a very awesome town. It's also in one of my favorite parts of the map, up in that Hazelton area, in between Hazelton and Sneed. It's a very cool stretch of the map, and the town itself is very cool as well. Next up we have Bedora. Honestly, Bedora is an S tier town, and it's very sad that we're not going to have Bedora anymore in the new map. So, rest in peace, Bedora. The time we have with you will be cherished. Next up is Sneed. Sneed is a straight C tier. I don't think a single person lives in Sneed because there's 3 houses, but they're all right next to an abandoned ghost town. So I don't think anyone would willingly live in them. So all Sneed really has to offer is a dam and a tornado shelter. Next up we have Welchel, which is also a C tier because it's just a few mobile homes, really. It's not that interesting, really, at all. And Welchel Valley is in the D tier because it's literally just Welchel, but only gravel roads. Next up we have Almora, which goes in the B tier, just because it's always offering some amazing damage shots every single time it gets hit, because it's right in the middle of everything. The Cherokee Village needs to be forgotten. There's literally no point of the town being here, and it's really just an annoying place. I do not like the Cherokee Village at all. Next up we have Hiram, which is, once again, another B tier town. Hiram is also kind of constantly getting glow downs, similar to Wadena. It used to be my favorite town, but that's slowly going away. And Hiram is once again another town that will not be present in the new map. So that makes me think a little bit more positively of it, and I'm going to try to make good of the time that we have left with Hiram. Nayville is a D tier town. There really isn't much to Nayville except for a few mobile homes and a tornado shelter, and there's trees absolutely everywhere. Literally the last time I intercepted in Nayville, a tree fell on my head. So I don't like it very much. I don't think Nayville likes me either. Next up we have Helma. Helma's honestly an A tier because the uranium mines are really cool and offer a tornado shelter that you probably shouldn't be staying in, but you know, take chances anyway, because why not? You're also just kind of always in Helma, which is awesome. I've just gotten used to being in that area because it's very close to the center of the map, making it very common to see tornadoes there. Next up, we have Trent, which honestly I think is a C tier town. It's not very good, but once again, one of the cities that will not be in the new map. The only reason I really like Trent, now that I think about it, is because the goofy way that it got its name. If you aren't aware of how it got its name, back when 1.18 was in development, I think it was 1.18 anyway, Willzuh, the creator of Twisted, was actually banned for one day for uploading an audio that is too loud. Yeah, definitely not a very just ban. And the moderator note that he got from the ban was signed by a Roblox moderator named Trent. So they decided to name an entire town after him for some reason. And I'm all for goofy things like that, so that's what's keeping it from D tier or F tier. Prior Lake is an A tier town. Prior Lake, I believe, is the closest town to the middle of the map besides Trent, which Trent is really more of a village than just a town. So you're there quite a lot. And also that truck stop that is just off to the side of Prior Lake is probably my favorite building in the entire game. It's really awesome to see things like that get added into the game, just for more variety of things to see anywhere on the map at all. Next up, we have West Viroqua, which I honestly think is a C tier town because it's just a bunch of lower bound houses and there really isn't much more to it. And I absolutely hate that you can't really go north off of it unless you use the interstate, which also goes slightly west, which typically drives me straight into more than one tornado. So not a huge fan of the navigation that has to be done in that area. Next up, we have Viroqua, which is an A tier. The only thing keeping it from S tier is that same thing with West Viroqua, where you barely can go north at all without going insanely out of the way of the tornado. Then we have Sylvia, which is an S tier town. Also, once again, very sad that the town is not going to be here anymore in the new map. So I'm going to pay my respects to Sylvia here. And then Sire is also definitely an S tier. The Sire EF7 tornado was one of my favorite moments in all of Twisted history. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the video that I put on screen. There might be a link in the card in the top corner if I remember how the heck I'm supposed to be able to do that, but chances are I probably don't. Next up, we have Peshtigo. Honestly, I think Peshtigo is another C tier town. It has had a little bit of a glow up recently by adding one whole gas station, and that's it. So that's basically the only thing keeping it from D tier. Starbuck is an A tier town. I really love spending time in Starbuck. It's in a very cool location, and seeing tornadoes down there is really awesome. I really love the terrain associated with Starbuck, and it's just all around a good town. Only thing keeping it from S tier is the size of the town being quite small. Next up is Hibbing in S tier, which is probably my favorite town in all of Twisted right now. A big waterfront city like Hibbing is really cool with the Hibbing Lake, and it has the terminal radar there as well. Definitely a very cool city. Funkley is an A tier. The only reason it's an A tier is for nostalgia reasons and tornadoes that I've seen in the area, especially with Funkley being in the game as long as it has. Besides that, it's basically Peshtigo Part 2. Waban should be forgotten as well, because it replaced what used to be my favorite town back in like 1.17 and 18. I will never forgive Waban for what it has done. Next up, we have Mizpah, which is yet again an A tier town. Mizpah is a very cool town to see tornadoes near, because once again, I really love the terrain associated with it. And it also has a repair shop for some reason. I'm also just realizing that I completely forgot to add Hazleton to this somehow. Just imagine that I put a little card that says Hazleton in the A tier, because it's kind of an overpopulated lag machine. That's the only thing keeping it from S tier. Anyway, on to the next tier list. This tier list is for all of the game passes that you can purchase with Robux. I'm not going to go too in-depth with every game pass because that's kind of the video Iron is working on right now, is a game pass tier list and guide. So I'm just going to kind of put things in places that I think make sense and rate them based on how much I like the game pass. National Weather Service Game Pass is the first one. That is going in S tier without a doubt. NWS Game Pass is arguably the most important game pass to Twisted, as it completely unlocks things like working for the National Weather Service at the building where the radar is controlling warnings, or you could also go out into the field and rate damage on the EF scale, which is a really, really important part of the game. Next up, we have the drone, which is also an S tier game pass. But that's partly also just because I'm a content creator and I really like getting aerial shots and screenshots. Next up, we have the Fire and EMS Game Pass, which is an A tier. I actually have a few world records that are definitely all outdated now, but I have a few records that were related to this Game Pass. Back in 1.20 in Hazleton, I had a massive wedge wipe out the entire town, and me and Kraz and a few other people went through and helped every single injured person in the entire town and got the world record for helping the most amount of injured people. That's still one of my favorite moments in Twisted history to this day. Next up, Infinite Fuel, S tier. I absolutely hate stopping at gas stations in Twisted, so this completely saves me from it. Double Income, also S tier. I like being rich, I guess. I don't know how else to put it. Chainsaw, B tier. Not really necessary because you can kind of, drive around trees. You don't really have to cut them. It's probably faster to just drive around them. But I do like chasing people every now and then, which is very fun. Starter Pack is an F tier. Literally, there is no reason to buy the Starter Pack at all. I make, the amount of money that the Starter Pack gives you, every single tornado anymore. And you can easily do the same. Nobody needs to buy the Starter Pack. Skywarn Spotter, D tier. And I'm actually going to move that to C tier. Because National Weather Service people commonly use Skywarn Spotter in their damage assessments. And lastly, the Custom Vehicle Color Game Pass goes in A tier. I really like customizing my vehicles to the fullest extent, so that allows me to do that. So once again, on to the next tier list. This is a tier list of all of the items you can purchase from things like gas stations. Starting off with a $10 can of food. That goes in D tier because there's a $5 can of food. That is going to go in C tier because it looks like it probably doesn't taste very good. Next up, we have a flashlight, which goes in S tier. I like being able to see in the dark, so that's pretty helpful. Potato chips go in S tier. They probably taste better than the can full of food. Sandwich goes in A tier. It looks like it tastes pretty good, but it also looks like it might be soggy. A can of gas goes in B tier because although it smells good, it'll probably give me a headache if I keep it for too long. And the can of diesel goes in A tier because I use more diesel vehicles than gas vehicles, and it's cheaper than a gas can. Anyway, on to the next tier list. This is a massive tier list of every single vehicle in the game, including the developer vehicles. There are 42 vehicles in the game in total, and they're only going to keep adding more. So I'm glad I'm doing this when I am, before I don't want to have to do this anymore when there's 700 vehicles in the game. So anyway, let's get started. Starting off with one of the developer vehicles, this bus thing is going to go in B tier because that looks like it would get rolled by a tornado in 5 seconds. Although I really do like the idea of having an entire bus related to just chasing tornadoes. Next up is the Cardboard Dominator. I don't know how in the world that thing is somehow stronger than the Dominator 1 and 2, and maybe even the Dom 3, I don't even know at this point. That is literally a living meme, and I love it. Next up, we have the Armored C7 Corvette, which is an A tier vehicle, because I really like the idea of driving a Corvette into a tornado. That sounds absolutely awesome. And for the first normal vehicle on the list, we have the 1995 Dodge Ram. I'll give that a B tier, because it's not the best vehicle, but it's not a bad vehicle by any means. And it's also the vehicle from Twister, so that's cool. Next up, we have the Dubia Donuts Monster Truck, which is going to go in A tier, because it's a monster truck. Followed by that, we have this thing, which looks like a Subaru Outback mixed with the Vortex 2 probe truck. That's going to go in C tier, because it looks like your average storm chasing vehicle that you see on the road. Next up is going to be the Joker. The thing is an absolute tank. It weighs way more than the Tiv 2, which is already absurdly heavy. Although it probably has a top speed of 5 miles an hour because of how heavy it is, that thing is definitely not going anywhere in a tornado. I would definitely trust going in that thing. Next up, we have the Fire Truck. F tier. It's slow and it's massive and it's loud. I don't like loud things, especially when I'm live streaming. You know what? The ambulance and the brush truck are also going in F tier for exactly those reasons, because all people do is torment me with them in live streams. Next up, we have the Dow 6, which goes in B tier. It gets me a lot of money, but it's also really boring to use, so I'm not going to put it in the A tier or S tier where my favorite vehicles are going to go. And then the Dow 3 is going to go in C tier because it's literally just the Dow 6, but it gives me less money. Next up, we have the Tiv 2, which is definitely going to go in S tier. You can't go wrong with the Tiv 2. It is an absolutely awesome vehicle, and I've definitely gotten the most intercepts with the Tiv 2, and I've had it for such a long time. It's definitely one of my favorite vehicles. Next up, we have the Dominator 3, which is also an S tier vehicle. You can't go wrong with the Dominator 3. And then the Dominator 2 is also an S tier vehicle. It's one of the best looking interceptors out there, and I've also intercepted way too many tornadoes with it. Next up, we have the Dom 1, which is an A tier vehicle, because it also looks really good, but you die in like kind of weak tornadoes sometimes, so it's going to stay down there. The Tiv 1 is going to go in C tier because it's slow and it takes a while to deploy and it's really weak. Sure, you can go in tornadoes with it still, so that's cool, but I don't like dying. So next up, we have the Scout, which is D tier. Because while, yes, it has 4 probes and it seems like it would be a really good vehicle, especially to start out with, it's really easy to die in because it's so light. So I don't like spending a bunch of money on repairing vehicles either. Next up, we have the Navarra Territory, which is like the vehicle that the Scout is based off of. So it's the Scout, but part 2. So also D tier. Next up, we have Old Blue, which is a B tier vehicle. You can fit way too many people in that car, and I love it. It's also really fast and really good for probing tornadoes, so I like it for that reason as well. Next up, we have the Bronson Arlington, which is going to be a C tier vehicle because it's basically just Old Blue, but a little bit less cool. Then there's the Chevy Silverado, which is going in A tier. You can't go wrong with the Silverado. It's one of the best vehicles. Now we have the Chevy Cobalt, but that's going in D tier because it's pretty easy to die in as well, similar to the Scout, and it only holds 2 probes. Next up, we have the Discovery Support Vehicle, which is going to go in C tier. Only reason it's not in B tier or A tier is because it doesn't have a mesonet, and I hate not knowing what the wind speeds are. Now we have the Chevy Tahoe, which is going in B tier because it's the Discovery Support Vehicle, but with a mesonet. Next up, we have the Chevy 454. It goes in D tier because it's absolutely awful as a vehicle, but it's the starter vehicle. Everyone has it, and everyone used it as their main chaser vehicle at some point. Therefore, it's going in D tier because of the purpose of the memories. Next up, we have the Grizzly, which is a C tier vehicle. It's a really good vehicle, but it's also really overpriced in my opinion, so I think it deserves its spot in C tier. Next up is the Kia, which is going in B tier because it's the Grizzly, but not overpriced. Then we have the Toyota Tundra, which is going right next to the Chevy Silverado because there's literally no difference between it and the Chevy Silverado, besides it's a Toyota instead of a Chevy. Next up, the F-150 is going in A tier because it's, once again, the exact same vehicle, except it's a Ford instead of a Toyota or a Chevy. The Ford Expedition is going in F tier because it's the worst vehicle in the game and you have to pay for it. Next up, the Subaru Forester goes probably in B tier. It's a very good chasing vehicle and an amazing vehicle for people to start out with. Next up, we have the Honda Civic, which definitely goes in S tier. It was the first vehicle I bought in Twisted, and I went like over a month with using just this vehicle because of how much I loved it. Next up is the Dodge Charger, which is going to go in A tier. It's a very useful vehicle since it's very fast. The only thing keeping it from S tier is because you can't drive 5 whole meters without it hydroplaning across the entire map. Next up, we have the Vortex 2 probe truck, which is also going in A tier. It's a very good vehicle to be using, and it offers quite a lot of money because it's a good vehicle and it holds 4 probes. That's how I got like at least $5 million from just this vehicle. Next up is the Doghouse, which goes in B tier. It is a really good vehicle, but it's just not my vehicle of choice. After that, we have the standard Dodge Ram, which is going to go in C tier because it's just a doghouse, but like worse and less cool. Next up, we have, for some reason, a Tesla. I don't know why. This is one of the developers' vehicles. It's going to go in D tier because why in the world would you take an electric car storm chasing? That's just plain stupid. Next up, we have whatever the heck this thing is as yet another developer vehicle. It's going to go in B tier because it looks cool. Next up, we have the Tiv 2, but different. Once again, another developer vehicle. I'm going to place it in B tier once again because I think the normal Tiv 2 is probably better. Next up, we have Tofu's vehicle. Jesse's vehicle is like the same thing, but a different base vehicle. So I'm just going to include it as also this vehicle, and it's going to go in C tier. And finally, the Windbreaker, which is, once again, an S tier developer vehicle. The Windbreaker is a very cool vehicle, and I've gotten to see it in person a few times as well. So I really enjoy seeing it out in the field, intercepting tornadoes. Very cool to see. But that wraps up this tier list. And that tier list will be the one that concludes this video. If you did enjoy, please consider subscribing, and also leave a like on the video as well. And with that being said, I'll see you guys soon. Peace.